Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really fun review for you guys from the brand Grand Seiko. A little about them. Seiko, their parent company, was originally founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin, now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry-level to high-end, and this is an example of their high-end division, Grand Seiko, which was originally founded in 1960. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this an everyday dress watch. You're going to be looking for those clean, classic, minimalist design aesthetics, as well as something that's going to be sensibly sized. This is the Grand Seiko SBGR325, and it's essentially the caliber 9S 25th anniversary piece, limited to 1,200 pieces. Now, this is out of their heritage collection, and it harkens all the way back to the first model to be powered by the revolutionary 9S caliber, which was in 1998, and that was the SBGR001, a watch that embodied all of the traditions and innovations of the Japanese watchmaker. Pretty much had accumulated since the very first Grand Seiko back in 1960. So to mark that 25-year of the landmark caliber, Grand Seiko has created a limited edition that pays tribute to a critical chapter in its history and its technical progression. Now, that particular blue dial is a sky blue that evokes the daytime sky as seen from the top of Mount Iwate, transporting wearers to the Iwate Prefecture, the home of Grand Seiko's mechanical watchmaking and the place where the 9S movements are made. You can get this new from Belmont Watches for $5,300. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so again, big shout out to Belmont Watches for providing this piece in to for me to share with you guys and for me to review. Some things to mention: the reason why there's a King Seiko and an SCVS, which some of you are just looking at thinking this just looks like a fancy SARB. Well, I got the King Seiko through Belmont, and we'll use it for comparing size, as well as this SCVS. The reason why I can't compare it to my SARB 035 in terms of size and wear is because I traded that to Belmont. So, and it sold very quickly. So if you're ever interested in some of my old watches, you'll probably find a couple of them there floating around from time to time. But essentially, I really wanted to make sure you guys got an idea of size, because I know not every place has a Grand Seiko boutique near them. And I think that's one of the things that's very, very special about this piece is the size. And unfortunately, although it is brand spanking new, the bracelet is, doesn't have the extra links in it when it was sent to me. So I can't put it on the wrist to show you how it will wear, but I do have some close comparables. So let's go ahead and get into some of let's go give this a quick little wipe here, just because you guys know that Zaratsu polishing is so impressive. I just want to make sure that you guys can get a good look at it. Now, let's see here. So this, in terms of the size, is very interesting. 37 millimeter diameter, which is really quite small. I know a lot of people like 36 as a bit of a sweet spot these days. I have a larger wrist, so I'm more of a 38 myself. I think that's my sweet spot, 30 and a half, especially for a watch of this type. But I will say that 37 millimeters, this does remind me much of the SARB 033 and 035. It does have a 13.3 millimeter thickness, which is quite thick, but again, for Grand Seikos, that is not anything crazy, but it also does, of course, employ a lot of those tricks that Seiko and Grand Seiko are so well known for. So this does actually sit on the wrist quite well, and it does mask its thickness quite well. It does have a very short and manageable 44.3 millimeters lug to lug. And of course, it is all stainless steel, brushed and polished, dual curved sapphire with AR coating. It has a push-pull crown. Nicely executed there. And inside, my goodness, guys, if I can even get this to show correctly, check out that, I got to give it another quick wipe, but this limited edition rotor is just gorgeous, guys. Check that out. If I can, ooh, there I am in the reflection. Check out that movement, so fantastic. This has the automatic Grand Seiko caliber 9S65, again with that limited edition rotor, is just gorgeous. Plus 5 to -3 seconds per day accuracy, 72-hour power reserve at a 4 hertz beat rate, or meaning that it will vibrate at 28,800 vibrations per hour. Just gorgeous, guys. And again, some of you guys who aren't super experienced with Seiko or Grand Seiko might be thinking, again, this is quite thick, but to show you guys, very similar profile to a watch that a lot of people praise. Of course, this has the same case, although it's not a SARB, it has the same case. This is kind of the daddy of the SARB, and honestly a little bit of a better model than the SARB, but you can see very comparable within that side profile. But you're also going to notice slightly shorter on the lug to lug, slightly more curvature on the lug to lug, and when you have them next to each other, you're going to also notice a smaller dial aperture, right? So this is going to wear a bit more like a true dress watch with that smaller dial, whereas here you were getting something that felt a little bit sportier. And on my wrist, I really do enjoy this piece still to this day, even though I do have quite a few more expensive pieces. Now, speaking of more expensive pieces, also if we compare this to this beautiful modern King Seiko, you can see at 38.5 millimeters versus the 37, the King Seiko is going to look slightly larger. Of course, you're going to have more angular facets, just a bit of a different style, but I did want to show these next to each other just in case, hey, maybe you were looking into a King Seiko. This is the more expensive model with the 6L movement, which makes it much thinner by comparison to the Grand Seiko, as you can see there. Very nice. But you don't get the same levels of guaranteed accuracy. They have a bit of a wider band there, although I will say in actual use that this King Seiko is extremely well tuned in terms of its timekeeping. I'm just trying to wipe off some of the smudges here, guys, just because so many facets and reflections to share. But this is definitely going to be more of an angular piece that ties into that 44 KS design language, whereas here you're going to have something that feels a little bit more contemporary, and I would say is a really good option to compare against something like, let's say, a Rolex Datejust, because this is just very clean, very classic, very simple. Look at the blue hues in the dial, absolutely gorgeous. Now, getting into the dial itself, you have applied indices that are polished and faceted. You get this sky blue sunray dial with the frame date window at the 3 o'clock. Beautifully done Grand Seiko Dauphine hands. Check out just the 3D nature. That additional beveling is just razor sharp, guys, and very hard to capture on camera. So I'm just going to try to get a little bit of reflection there so you guys can see it. Now, the high polished handset looks fantastic. Also, you're going to get that thermally blued seconds hand. You're also going to get 100 meters of water resistance. So some of that thickness is also from the robustness within the tolerances of the case to make sure that you are getting that additional water resistance. 19 millimeter lug width, which is great. I'm glad they didn't go down into 18. I feel like 19 is still going to give you a nice amount of wrist presence if you do have a larger wrist. And you have, of course, solid links and end links in this full 5-link bracelet, as you can see on the opposite side, that those are fully separated pieces, so there's no cheating in terms of making it appear to be more links that are actually there. This does have a mild taper that will go down from that 19 millimeters down to 18 millimeters at the milled clasp, and you also do have two, although they're not present on here, they're probably inside the box that is still headquartered at Belmont. You'll also get 2 half links to really dial this in, and of course additional links to where you can get this on your wrist. So normally I would cut away for getting this on the wrist. But I will say again, since I don't have, since I can't, get my hand in here because it's a smaller piece, not adjusted to my wrist, I'll just give you guys a quick look here at this little guy. So as you can see, it would be a similar wear, smaller, ultimately, again, smaller dial opening, so it's going to be a little bit smaller. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get some lens distortion, so I'm just going to scoot that over, and then I'll tighten up the frame here so you guys can get a true aspect ratio. And notice that very manageable lug to lug dimension is going to help this sit very beautifully. And some of you might be thinking, hey, that dial seems a bit open and expansive, and maybe this looks a bit too sporty and not quite as traditionally dressy. So that's where you have something like this. You can see the hash marks are not going to be individualized into sub-seconds. They're just going to be 1 per second there. So very nice, or minute depending on what you're measuring. So I do like that, and I do like the way that this is spaced. And again, it just feels very, very dressy and very, very luxurious. So off to the side again, and actually before we cut away, let's go ahead and get the King Seiko on wrist as well, just so you can get another quick comparison in terms of the dial opening and the general case silhouette. Just giving it a couple of quick wipes here. Sorry about that, guys. In terms of how this makes fit. So you can see here, even on my 7.5-inch wrist, that 38.5 for me is my sweet spot. But I will say that 36 isn't far off. So this is going to be, again, it's going to give it more of a dedicated, dressy feel while it is on your wrist. Although it is a quite robust case, it does hide it really well in terms of just giving you some gorgeous facets to look at. So now what I'm going to do is set this up for, although there is no loom, we'll get into some low light transition and closing thoughts, and I'll make sure to get everything wiped down so you can really take advantage of the beautiful finishing within this piece. Okay, let's go into the lights here. And again, no loom. So of course I'll just be working in a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to maybe even include a bit of harsh lighting, high contrast that might show any types of production defects. But here, as you would expect, you're just going to see probably just a couple of fingerprints, smudges, and little particles of dust, but everything else is just immaculate. Look at how uniform the brushing, just the light, the way it glides over the bracelet. Very, very nice. You can see the fine level of detail, and of course there is that deep distortion-free Zaratsu polishing that is always so impressive there. So very, very beautiful. And the beautiful thing here that I really like is because of the case shape, because of the style. This is something that, although quite dressy, I think once you wear it and you get a couple of flaws here and there, little scratches, signs of wear and tear, you'll be able to have a beautiful wabi-sabi to the watch, which again ties into more so the cultural outlook of Japan and these beautiful high-end pieces of craftsmanship, guys. The artisan nature of these dials, of these indices, the handsets. Look at the way the light just dances over the bevel on that minute hand. That is just fantastic. And even if we get straight on here, just a lot of beautiful contrast. You can see the dial plays with different colors. You can see deep grays, almost like a storm cloud, and then clear blue skies at the same time. So very, very nice. Again, very, very versatile in terms of if you imagine this on your own wrist. So guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. This does wear a hair small in terms of visually, I think, because of that smaller dial opening, but I have a quite large wrist at 7.5 inches. So comparatively to something like, let's say, like my SARB or SCVS001 in this case. I think also the inclusion of that 19mm bracelet versus them scaling down to, let's say, an 18mm, that did help in terms of ensuring that proper wrist presence. I can, although I couldn't put it on the wrist, I could do a pretty decent job visualizing it on there. So I think it will fit really nice. And again, although visually it might appear quite a bit smaller than I'm used to, I think the way that it would actually wear would be pretty close. And I think also the smaller dial, it does lend to more of a dedicated dressy aesthetic, which is a good thing, right? Depending on the situation, of course. So the thickness is pretty well hidden thanks again to those signature Seiko ergonomically friendly grammar of design techniques. In terms of model variants, this is a special edition, so there aren't too many variations in this. I'm sure there are limited variations of this particular case and whatnot. I don't have all of the references, but for all intents and purposes, we're just looking at this model, and I do love the colorway. Man, I would love to see this type of color layout on a modern King Seiko, similar to the one that I shared with you guys, my SJE091, again, purchased through Belmont Watches. Now, in terms of comparable models, I'd say this is just a premium Japanese alternative to the 36mm Rolex Datejust. So if you're looking for that kind of everyday, dressy, dress up, dress down, classic, timeless piece, I think this really hits the mark, especially in this colorway, which gives you some of those more contemporary and modern vibes while still being super versatile. So for me, guys, bottom line, this is kind of the perfect Grand SARB, right? With that super versatile color combo that adds the perfect amount of pop to the overall understated and timeless design layout. Very, very nice. I really, really dig this one. Big shout out again to the folks at Belmont Watches. Their team's always really great about supporting the channel. So if you'd like to support them, definitely check the links in the description. So if you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.